Charlene Olmedo held David Anthony Burke, who goes by the name of a singer David spelled D4vd, to answer for the horrific and barbaric killing of a 14-year-old at the time, Celeste Rivas Hernandez. She has held him to answer for first-degree murder with the special circumstances of lying in wait, doing this crime for financial gain, and murdering a witness to an investigation.
In a Los Angeles courtroom on the 27th of July, a judge read out her decision, and the 21-year-old at the defense table barely moved. He folded his arms. He stared straight ahead. And when the judge finished ordering him to stand trial for murder, David Anthony Burke, the singer the world knows as D4vd, showed almost nothing at all. A few feet behind him sat the parents of a 14-year-old girl. They had come to that courtroom for days. They had just heard the worst days of their lives read aloud, in detail, in public. The girl was their daughter. Her name was Celeste Rivas Hernandez, and she was found in the trunk of his car, one day after what would have been her 15th birthday. Everyone watching assumed this was the moment the case slammed shut. But over the 5 days that led to it, something else was happening. Quietly, in the cross-examinations almost nobody reported. The case was coming apart at the edges, and the defense showed exactly where it intends to cut. This is Quiet Record. Stay with us. Let's start with what actually happened in that room, because the headline and the reality are not the same thing. The proceeding was a preliminary hearing, and it ran 5 days, from the 21st to the 27th of July. It exists to answer one narrow question: is there enough evidence for this case to go to trial? Not whether Burke is guilty, just whether there's enough to move forward. After 12 prosecution witnesses, Judge Charlene Olmedo gave her answer. The people, she said, had met their burden on all charges, and she ordered Burke held to answer, including on the special circumstances that make this a possible death penalty case. So he'll stand trial on all 3 counts: murder, the continuous sexual abuse of a child under 14, and the unlawful mutilation of human remains. Bail was denied. He stays in custody. An arraignment on the formal charges is set for the 31st of August, and a trial date will follow that. Now here is the part the headline skated straight past. The judge herself called the standard she was applying exceedingly low. A preliminary hearing runs on probable cause, the idea that there's just enough evidence that a reasonable person could believe the charges might be true. It is one of the lowest bars in the entire justice system. A prosecutor can clear it while the case still has real holes in it. A defendant can be ordered to trial today and walk free at a jury verdict months from now. That matters more here than usual, because clearing that low bar is not the same as having a case that survives 12 jurors. And what came out over those 5 days suggests the road ahead is anything but a straight line. Burke has pleaded not guilty. He is presumed innocent, and to actually convict him, prosecutors will have to convince a jury, unanimously, beyond a reasonable doubt, a mountain of a standard next to the one that was just met. Before we climb into the evidence, for anyone new to this, here's how we got to that courtroom, because you can't weigh the cracks without seeing the whole. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was 14. She was from Lake Elsinore, a working-class city in Riverside County more than an hour east of Los Angeles. Her parents came to this country from El Salvador. The neighbors who knew her remember a girl with long dark curls who loved Hello Kitty, who loved to sing and dance, who walked to the corner store most afternoons like clockwork. Her family reported her missing more than once in early 2024, the first time around Valentine's Day, when she was 13 years old. More than a year and a half later, in September of 2025, workers at a Los Angeles tow yard reported a smell coming from an impounded car. It was a Tesla, registered to David Burke. Inside, investigators found Celeste's remains. She had been there so long that identifying her required forensic examination, and the confirmation came a day after what should have been her 15th birthday. Burke, by then, was a star. He'd built his career the way a lot of his generation does, making music for video game clips online, until a song called Romantic Homicide caught fire in 2022, carried him onto the Billboard charts, and won him a deal with a major label. By the spring of 2025, he had a debut album, a world tour, and millions of listeners. Prosecutors say that behind that rise was a sustained crime against a child. They allege Burke and Celeste first made contact in 2022, when she was 11, and that a sexual relationship began when she was 13 and he was 18. The evidence of that relationship, thousands of messages, images the court could not lawfully display, is, in their telling, overwhelming. Those allegations are grave, and they are the foundation of 2 of the 3 charges. But the charge that will define this trial is the murder, and that is where the case gets complicated. Let's start with the prosecution's strongest ground, because it's genuinely strong, and honesty means saying so before we say anything else. The state's case is built on evidence that is hard to wave away. A DNA analyst testified that blood-matching Celeste was found throughout the garage of the home where Burke was staying, on a floor mat, on exercise equipment, on a tarp, on a Tesla charging cable. Much of it was invisible to the eye and only surfaced under chemical testing. The strength of the match was described in court as astronomical. Investigators laid out a paper trail of purchases they say were made under names that weren't his. Aliases used to order a shovel, chainsaws, an inflatable pool, a body bag, and an incinerator. And a criminalist testified that tiny blue plastic fragments recovered from Celeste's remains physically matched that inflatable pool. Then there's the digital evidence, and this is the backbone of the timeline. Prosecutors say that on the night of April 23, 2025, Burke arranged an Uber that carried Celeste from Lake Elsinore to his home in the Hollywood Hills. Records show she arrived around 10 at night and texted him that she was there. Location data then shows his phone and his Tesla leaving that home together, late, and traveling north toward Santa Barbara County, toward a remote stretch of highway where, months later, an officer found Celeste's passport card lying in the dirt. And running under all of it are the messages. The state presented texts from the days before her death that they say show an argument and a motive. Celeste threatening to expose the relationship and end his career. In the prosecution's telling, a 14-year-old had become a threat to everything Burke had built, so he erased the threat. Laid out that way, it sounds like a case that's already over. A relationship documented in thousands of messages. Her blood in his garage. Her body in his car, purchases under fake names, his car on the road to where her ID turned up. If you believe a case like Celeste deserves to be told exactly like this, carefully, both sides weighed, never sensationalized, then subscribe. Not for us, for the standard, because here's where that airtight case starts to breathe. The first problem is the one that should stop you cold. Nobody saw the killing, and there's a window of time no one on earth can account for. Prosecutors say Celeste was killed shortly after she arrived, inside a span of roughly 20 minutes on the night of April 23rd. But when the lead detective took the stand, he had to concede what the evidence doesn't have. There's no eyewitness who saw Celeste step out of that Uber. There's no witness to anything that happened inside that home. And for that critical stretch, the exact minutes the state says she died, there are no messages, no calls, nothing at all documenting it. The prosecution's theory is that Burke stood by and watched Celeste bleed to death, and they lean on the fact that no one called 911. But an assumption is not a witness, and the defense saw the opening immediately. Then there's the surveillance. This is a home in the Hollywood Hills. There was a camera system. So ask the obvious question, where's the footage from that night? The answer, delivered in open court, is that there isn't any. By the time investigators knew to look, months had gone by, and the system had overwritten itself. The video was simply gone. There may be a perfectly innocent explanation for that. Plenty of these systems do exactly that. But the effect is the same either way. The one thing that could show Celeste arriving, or Burke inside that house, or anyone leaving it, does not exist. So the state's account of the most important 20 minutes of this entire case rests on inference. Not on a person who saw it. Not on a single frame of video. That's the first gap. The second one runs straight through the cause of death itself. For the prosecution's story to hold, they need more than the fact that Celeste died. They need how, and when, and by whose hand. And their own medical examiner, on the stand, could not hand them the clean answers. Dr. Grant Ho testified that Celeste died of 2 penetrating wounds, one to the abdomen, one to the chest. He was firm that the manner of death was homicide. That much was never in doubt. But but almost everything orbiting it was. He could not say which wound came first. He could not name the weapon. He could not say whether there'd been a struggle. And on the question that props up the entire "watched her bleed out" narrative, how long she took to die, he gave a window so wide it reads like an admission. Minutes, he said, possibly up to an hour. He wouldn't go further than that. The reason for all that uncertainty is grim and simple: the state of the remains. By his estimate, Celeste had been dead at least weeks, possibly 4 or 5 months, before she was found. The decomposition took the finer answers with it. It took investigators around 3 months just to finalize her cause of death. Now think about what that does to the prosecution's story. They want to argue premeditation, a killer watching, waiting, choosing. But their own expert can't fix the sequence, the weapon, or the timing. And in a case where the special circumstances, the pieces that could send Burke to death row, turn on proving exactly how deliberate this was, that uncertainty is not a footnote, it's a fault line. And it keeps going. Because the third weakness is the physical evidence that should have been there and wasn't. Remember those chainsaws, ordered under a fake name, that the prosecution folded into its story? Investigators recovered 2 of them. Both tested negative for blood. A detective admitted on the stand that if a chainsaw had been used the way the state alleges, it's very hard to explain how it carried no blood at all. A third chainsaw the records point to was never found. The incinerator, the burn box, was recovered unopened and never tested. Then there was the DNA on one of the trash bags, a mixture of genetic material from 4 different people. Burke was a possible contributor. Celeste was excluded from that particular sample. Other items did carry her DNA and not his, so this cuts in both directions. But a 4-person mixture hands the defense an obvious question to shout at a jury: who else was handling this? And the Uber driver. For months, the driver who supposedly delivered Celeste to that house was a load-bearing piece of the story. When investigators finally sat him down, he said he didn't remember the trip, couldn't confirm the drop-off, didn't recall picking her up. The state has the ride records, but the human being who supposedly made the drive can't confirm a second of it. None of this makes Burke innocent. The blood in the garage doesn't evaporate because a chainsaw came back clean. But every one of these gaps is a place a defense lawyer can plant a flag and tell a jury, you cannot be certain. And certainty is the whole game at trial. And that leads to a question that hangs over this entire case. One, the prosecution has never fully answered. How does a 14-year-old girl decompose for months in a car parked near a busy home and nobody notices? This is where it gets strange. Legal analysts who sat through the hearing kept circling the same thing: the smell. When detectives first went to the house, Burke reportedly apologized for an odor. There were 11 air fresheners in that Tesla. This was a young man with money, with an entourage, with people coming and going, including, by one witness's account, a live-in security guard. And the question that keeps surfacing is whether one person could really have done all of this and hidden all of this entirely alone. To be clear about the line here, as of today, Burke is the only person charged. No one else has been named, accused, or cleared. Reporting that others may have been involved has come from anonymous sources, not from the record, and it stays firmly in the category of unproven. But it's not nothing that the district attorney convened an investigative grand jury and compelled testimony from people in Burke's orbit: his manager, his finance staff, associates, some of whom did not come willingly. And there's one more shadow over the case that has nothing to do with the defense. After graphic details of Celeste's autopsy leaked to the media before any official release, more than a dozen employees at the county medical examiner's office were ordered to answer questions about whether they'd accessed the file without authorization. It's an internal integrity problem, but it's the kind of thing a defense attorney files away, because anything that looks like the system mishandling this case is something they can put in front of a jury. Which brings us to what the defense actually did in that courtroom. Because they didn't just poke holes, they previewed a strategy, and it's going to make people angry. I want to be careful and exact here, because this is the part that's easy to get wrong, and getting it wrong does real harm to a child who can't defend herself. The defense signaled 2 possible directions, and both point away from a deliberate murder. The first is that Celeste may have caused her own death. The defense raised her mental health and asked whether her messages ever referenced wanting to end her life. The second, and the one analysts think is stronger, is self-defense, the argument that Celeste was the aggressor that night. To build it, the defense pulled out messages the prosecution had left on the table. In them, Celeste is furious, reportedly after seeing Burke tagged online with another woman, an LA model named Asia Collins. The defense pointed to texts where Celeste threatened his career, threatened to contact his mother and his management, used violent language toward him. And they argued it was Celeste who insisted on that meeting, that she pushed to come over, and that he first told her no. Now here is where the guardrails matter, and here is what the judge and the prosecution said back. Because you need both halves, or you don't have the truth. The judge struck the line of questioning about Celeste being violent from the record. Her reasoning was blunt. Celeste is the victim here. She is not the one on trial. Whether any of that ever becomes relevant is a question for a jury, not for this hearing. And the prosecution's answer cut to the bone. It does not matter, they argued, how old Celeste told Burke she was. It does not matter if she claimed to be 18. A 13-year-old cannot consent, and a child's age or behavior is not a legal defense to abusing that child. The prosecutor said it plainly. Nothing here sounds like an accident, and we are talking about a child. The family heard that strategy laid out in real time. Their attorney did not hold back afterward. He said the family was horrified that the defense would bring up evidence trying to pin blame on a 14-year-old, and he reminded everyone that Burke had been told by a sheriff's deputy at his own front door in early 2024 that Celeste was only 13. And through all of it, the graphic testimony, the photos, the strategy that reduced a murdered child to a provocation, the man at the defense table gave the room almost nothing. Reporters who watched him for 5 days described someone who walked in some mornings smiling and laughing with his lawyers. Someone who sat still, staring ahead, for hours. The one moment he reportedly started taking notes was during the discussion of the text messages. A courtroom sketch artist who studied his face for days put it the way a lot of people in that room seemed to feel it. It was like he was off on a different plane. That reaction, or the lack of one, is not evidence of anything. A jury will be told exactly that, but it is the thing everyone who was in that room keeps coming back to. If this is the kind of coverage you want, where the defense's argument gets stated honestly and then measured against the law, instead of just screamed about, leave a comment when we reach the question at the end. This one has earned a real conversation. There's one more layer, and it's the one that could decide whether Burke lives or dies. This isn't only a murder charge. It's a murder charge with 3 special circumstances bolted on. And in California, those are what make a case eligible for the death penalty. The 3 here are lying in wait, murder for financial gain, and the murder of a witness. And the defense went at all 3, hard, because if they fall, the death penalty likely falls with them. Take lying in wait, a planned, concealed attack. The defense argued it doesn't fit, because Celeste was the one who insisted on coming. In their telling, Burke wasn't crouched in ambush. By their account, he was at home doing something ordinary when she pushed to arrive. The prosecution shot back that lying in wait doesn't require a jump scare, that arranging the Uber and getting her to that house was itself the setup. Take murder for financial gain. The defense called the theory novel and unsupported, arguing his income never depended on Celeste's death and that future earnings were speculative anyway. The prosecution pointed to California case law, holding that killing to prevent a financial loss counts every bit as much as killing for a gain. Take the murder of a witness. The defense argued Celeste threatened to expose the relationship to family and online, but never threatened to go to police, and that plenty of people already knew. The prosecution's position is that no formal investigation needs to exist yet for that circumstance to apply. Judge Olmedo, on that low probable cause standard, let all 3 go forward. But letting them proceed and proving them to a jury are different universes. The district attorney, Nathan Hochman, confirmed no decision has been made on whether to actually pursue the death penalty. That call is still being weighed, and the defense will get to argue against it. For now, Burke is held without bail, waiting on that August arraignment and a trial after it. So, is the case against D4vd falling apart? Here's the honest answer. On the charges built from the digital evidence, the sexual abuse allegations rooted in the messages and images, the ground is hard, and even the defense spent little time fighting the strongest of it. But on the murder charge, and especially on the special circumstances that could send him to death row, the picture is genuinely contested. No eyewitness, no video of the death, a medical examiner who can't fix the time, the weapon, or the order of the wounds, clean chainsaws, a missing Uber memory, and a defense that has clearly found its footing. None of that means he didn't do it. Probable cause was met. A judge looked at all of it and said this goes forward. But goes forward is where the hard part starts, not where it ends. At trial, the standard climbs from a whisper to a mountain. 12 people, unanimous, beyond a reasonable doubt. And the weaknesses that opened over these 5 days are exactly where a defense will make its home. And underneath all the machinery, there is still Celeste. In Lake Elsinore, where she grew up, there's a memorial now. People leave flowers, candles, little tokens for a girl who loved Hello Kitty. They've written justice for Celeste, and they mean it. The town that reported her missing when she was 13 has not let go of her name. Her parents came to that courtroom day after day and sat through the worst of it, because appearing was the only thing left they could do for her. Whatever a jury eventually decides about David Burke, none of it hands them back the daughter, or the 15th birthday she never reached. That is the part no ruling resolves. So here's what I want to ask you, and I want a real answer, not a one-word one. Now that you've seen both sides, where does this land for you? Do you think the murder case is strong enough to convict, that everything around the killing holds together? Do you think it's the special circumstances, the death penalty pieces, that are actually in danger? Or, setting the law aside for a second, after everything you just heard, what do you feel watching that man sit there and show nothing at all? Tell me, because a jury is going to wrestle with some version of that exact question, and I want to know where you land before they do. We'll be watching the August arraignment, the death penalty decision, and every step toward trial. When something moves, there'll be a follow-up. This story is far from over. This has been Quiet Record, verified reporting, named sources, no invented forensics, no gore for clicks. If that's the kind of true crime you've been looking for, the kind that treats a 14-year-old as a person and not a headline, and gives you both sides of a fight this serious, then subscribe so the next case finds you. Celeste Rivas Hernandez was 14 years old. We'll keep telling this carefully until there's an ending worth telling. Rest easy.